Morning, guys. This week we're going to be talking about populations. So characteristics of a population, this is something that all populations have in common. All right, there are 4 key characteristics. The first one is their geographic range, so that's where a population lives. The next one is their growth rate, so how a population's size will change, like will it get bigger or smaller and how quickly will that happen. The third is their density and distribution. So density is how many are people or individuals or species, whatever we're talking about, is in a given space. And their distribution is how are they spaced out. We'll talk about that on the next slide. And then the last one is their age structure. So a breakdown on the sex of the individuals in the population. So is it a male or a female, and how old they are. So the next thing we're going to talk about, like I said in the last slide, is the density and distribution of a population. So distribution is going to refer to how the individuals in the population are spaced out. All right. So the first one we have is random. This is uneven spacing, like in that first picture, like where a tree is located. Like if you think of a forest, they're not like evenly spaced out. They're just wherever the seeds landed. The second one is uniform or evenly spaced. This lots of times is due to competition, like when animals fight for a territory, it leaves them evenly spaced with each other. And then our last one is clumped or closely packed together. Lots of times prey species do this, right? They like have schools of fish or herds of deer or things like that. They like live in big clusters. Okay, that's distribution and density. Then we talk about population growth. So populations are all going to change, right? They change their size and they change based on the following things. The first is the birth rate. So how many individuals were born? The second is the death rate. So how many individuals died? Then migration, so who left and who came to the population, all right? There are 2 types of migration. We have immigration, and when you guys see the word immigration, I want you to think of the I for immigration, okay? And the I in into. So for immigration, we have an I right here, right? See how I highlighted it? And then you have into, which also starts in an I. So immigration is the movement of individuals into an area. So that's when people come to your population. And then emigration, right, starts with an E. And I want you to think of the word exit. Emigration is when individuals leave an area. So immigration will increase our population size. Emigration is going to decrease it. So the growth rate, right, is how fast or how slowly the population is changing. So population increase happens if the birth rate is greater than the death rate. Okay, the population is stable if the birth rate equals the death rate, and the population declines or goes down if the birth rate is less than the death rate. Okay, make sure you know what those signs are here, right? So birth rate is greater for the first one, equals for the second one, and then birth rate is less than the death rate for the third one. Okay. There are 2 different types of growth when we talk about population growth. We have exponential growth, which is when a population grows rapidly. It doesn't slow down, so you have 1 and it turns to 2, and 2 double into 4, and 4 double into 8, and 8 double into 16, all right? And the graph ends up looking like a J, like this graph down here, right? Starts slow until you get a whole bunch of numbers, and then they go really fast up, right? Viruses, not viruses, well, viruses, yeah, but they're not really living, but bacteria do that. Things that are really small tend to do that. And our second type of growth is logistic growth. Logistic growth is when a population first grows rapidly, then it slows down, and then it actually stops growing. So it stops getting bigger or smaller. Things still change in it. Animals die and animals are born, or people die and people are born, but they're not actually growing any faster, the population size, okay? This occurs because there are limiting factors, which are going to cause a carrying capacity, okay? Here's 2 vocab words. We have limiting factors and a carrying capacity. All right, so if we look at this graph, we have our population growing rapidly in the beginning, right? And then we start to slow down. And once we get to this up and down here, this is when our population size doesn't actually change and we've reached carrying capacity. So carrying capacity is the largest number of individuals that an environment can hold or support. All right, so first the population is going to go above the carrying capacity. And in this picture here, you can see how it overshoots it. It gets too high. Okay, when it gets too high, lots of the individuals then die. They either starve or they don't have the resources they need. They can't get this, so they can't get food. There isn't space, so they're killed through competition, right? So then the population decreases and goes under carrying capacity over here, right? So the size of the population, then when it goes under, has room to go up again. It goes up, so it kind of goes up and down at carrying capacity. So carrying capacity would be kind of the middle of where it's doing that up and down and up and down. When the population is at carrying capacity, your birth rate will equal your growth rate. So organisms are still dying, but they're being born at the same kind of rate. So we're still changing out animals or people or whatever, but the rate is the same. It's not just like a continuous growth faster than things are dying. There are limits to the growth. So we said our carrying capacity is when we reach our limiting factors. The limiting factors is anything that controls the growth of a population. They include competition, parasites and disease, overcrowding, predation, and herbivory. That's when animals prey on plants, actually has a name, right? And weather. And fires, natural disasters, okay, those are limiting factors. Oh, it went twice. There are two types of limiting factors. We classify them in two ways. You have density-dependent factors and density-independent factors. Density-dependent factors are going to affect crowded populations, all right? That's competition, predation, parasitism and disease, and overcrowding, so stress from overcrowding, right? So organisms are looking for things to eat. There's too many around. There's not enough pizza for everyone in the room, right? Makes sense? And then density-independent factors affect the population, like regardless of how big the population happens or is. And this is natural disasters for the most part. This is like something that comes and like wipes out everybody, a forest fire, right? Takes down everything. It doesn't matter if you're a big population or a small population. Everything's wiped out, okay? So density independent, doesn't matter the size, it's like just mass destruction, pretty much like drought. It doesn't matter how many plants there are, if there's a drought, they all like suffer. Whereas density dependent, it matters how many because they pass disease to one another because they're closely packed. There's not enough food because there's too many of them, right? So I have like my penguins, that would be density dependent issues, and then my drought on the other side. So density dependent factors, competition is when a population becomes crowded. The organisms compete with each other for food, water, space, sunlight, mates, okay? Predation is a population in nature is going to be controlled by this. This is that the predators are going to eat the prey and make them decline. Predation of plants is called herbivory. As the predator population increases, the prey decreases. Then as the prey decreases, the predators starve and they decrease. When there are less predators, prey increases again, which causes the predators then to increase, right? And they follow each other in a graph. We're going to look at those this week. It's going to cause the population to cycle. And then the last one for density dependent is parasitism and disease. And what it is that close populations have a higher chance to spread disease to one another. Also parasites, right? Little things that kind of just pass